Hey guys, tonight we slip into the hushed world of Tudor England, where the wind whispers through ancient oaks and the pale moonlight bathes the red-tiled roofs of Hampton Court. You won't survive this if your heart still races at the thought of power and pleasure, but don't worry, we're only just beginning. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you right now? Drop a comment telling me which town or city you're listening from and what time it is there. In this moment, imagine yourself standing on the cool stone courtyard. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves, carrying the scent of burning candles and sandalwood. In the distance, the sea waves lap softly against the shore, composing a lullaby for a waking dream. Amidst this scene, a majestic silhouette glides into view. Henry VIII, the young king, tall and broad-shouldered, as if carved from marble, his footsteps echoing like a distant drumbeat beside your ear. Candlelight dances upon his golden crown, forming a hazy halo, yet his eyes reveal more than glory, a hidden yearning, a belief that the measure of the crown lies not only in sword and throne, but in the assertion of manhood behind closed doors. The dry lavender mingles with melting wax, evoking a feeling both comforting and suffocating, awakening in you a mysterious stir. As insects trill softly against the window pane, Henry pauses to gaze at the star-flecked sky. The moonlight glitters like crystal, beckoning him toward the tragic journey of desire that lies ahead. And you, companion in the silent night, listen to the crackle of the hearth fire, feel the breeze rustle through the leaves, and prepare to drift into a soothing yet haunting dream of power and passion. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Place yourself in the cool, stone corridors of Hampton Court, where candlelight flickers and shadows dance, and the wind sighs through narrow windows. In that hushed expanse, Henry VIII strides in with regal confidence. His golden crown gleams like a halo, yet his eyes hold an unspeakable craving. In youth, Henry was a vigorous prince, intoxicated by displays of strength and the thunder of hooves on the tilt-yard, embodying the ideal Renaissance leader. But in the bedchamber witnessed only by stone walls and candle flames, Henry believed that true power was measured not just by sword and scepter, but by a man's prowess. The scent of dried lavender and melting wax entwined, reminding you of the king's deepest desire. Each breath he draws feels like a whispered plea beneath the moon. Only by conquering both heart and body can I prove my right to the throne. As darkness deepens and insects chorus outside, Henry contemplates his destiny. The stars above shimmer with otherworldly invitation, beckoning him into the tragic odyssey of love and dominion. And you, silent companion in the still of night, follow his footsteps. Hear the hearth crackle, feel the breeze stir the leaves, and begin the tale of desire and power at the heart of a king. Morning climbs slowly over the red roofs of Hampton Court. The pale pink of dawn seems stirred by an invisible silver spoon, dissolving into thin mist while distant waves keep a soft, even rhythm along the riverbank. As the breeze moves gently through ancient elms, last night's beeswax candles still burn low, their trails gleaming like memories not yet cool. We stand beneath a cool stone eave and listen to the morning's breath, in, out, long and unhurried, fading into birds that haven't fully woken. At the threshold where history brushes myth, a princess from the Mediterranean sun crossed the waters to this land of fog. Catherine of Aragon, her name like a raindrop on a window, brought imagined Seville orange, Latin prayers, and the composure of one raised beneath vaulted churches. When she stepped through the gates, red gold tapestries softened like gentle surf, and wind from the rose garden drifted in, carrying the scent of leaves washed by night rain. Their wedding, Henry and Catherine's, unfolded beneath high arches where light sifted through stained glass into washes of blue, green, and violet. The chapel bell tolled slowly, the castle's great heart beating inside its ribcage of stone. Each peal was a pause. We hear a breath drawn in, then released. Silk brushing silk, heels touching tile, a litany returning from curved walls. With God as witness, we stand together. The words fell like a feather, touching the water of time and widening into quiet rings. Henry, poised between youth and a new halo of glory, stood upright, like a pillar shoring up the sky. Yet, in his candlelit eyes, a very thin shadow circled, reminding that a crown arrives with silent demands. Catherine looked at him and smiled with dew-like gentleness. She understood the unspoken, the hope for an heir, a prince to carry the royal name down the flagstone road. The palace was tame then, like a large animal with claws tucked away. Corridors were carpeted, tall windows received wind from the little wood beyond, where sleepy squirrels hugged their tails. Sometimes we heard dry leaves murmur together, as if someone turned a page in an ancient book. Servants moved like tidewater, setting silver bowls that caught candle flecks, laying smooth linen. There was no drama, only the calm of a world taking one long breath. Catherine, the centre of this morning's hush, was not a sudden blaze. She was more like a long shore that let waves come and go, keeping the sparkle of salt and shells. She spoke gently, read leather-bound books, embroidered a rose in silk thread, sometimes pausing to listen to the window's wind. Her heartbeat, if we leaned very close, would be even as a noonday bell, neither hurried nor sorrowed, simply present. We can imagine her walking through the roses, fingertips grazing wet leaves. Morning is so thin we hear the fall of dew, a bead rolling past a thorn, and even the earth's breathing. She stands before a small chapel, a pale blue flame trembling in the draught. The prayer is unrushed, like a low stream moving under forest. She asks for a quiet hearth, for weathered hearts to know gentler seasons, and if it may be, for a dynasty's wish to take form. But time is a patient artist. The months and years glide by like paper boats, no clamour, no breaking, only the soft ferrying of small hopes. Birds sing on the sill and fall silent, sing and fall silent, until we notice their melody has shifted, as though the season has turned from green to gold. Each morning Catherine combs her hair at the mirror, a breath of rosewater passing like a greeting, and steps into the day, leaving behind a hush like candle ash. The nobility whisper, leaves whispering on oak. They speak of the throne in the language of numbers and pedigrees, while Catherine listens with calm. All things have their season. She does not argue or recount. She straightens a table, gives a warm nod, sends a letter of health to a distant cousin. Among strings drawn taut as lutes, she loosens each one with a light hand. Henry too, at first, still visits the chapel, kneeling long before the candles. Sometimes he murmurs to no one, as if speaking inward. His breathing slows, shoulders settle, and youth's impatience seems to blend into beeswax and the hush outside. And yet beneath the still surface of ritual lies a current, an unnamed expectation, a demand of history more than of a single man. There are noons when sunlight slips along the stone floor like a kitten. Catherine reads in the library. Henry passes, pausing briefly to ask about a page. They speak at a volume that will not wake the castle. Are we well? We are well. These answers promise nothing grand. They merely allow both to exhale a little longer, and when evening tilts, wine drifts from the small wood, carrying damp timber. The hearth settles low, and in the fading coals we glimpse distant mountains Catherine left behind, and the future harbours Henry has not reached. History, at this moment, is like a fairy tale whispering, "Rest a while, the road will be long." Aye, so we meet them, a king learning to listen to his own breath, and a queen who wears steadiness like a lullaby. No drums are needed, only a heartbeat, unhurried, even, and the footfall of wind across wet grass. In that quiet, you too can let your shoulders drop and your eyes fall half closed, as if leaning against a cool stone arch and watching dawn turn itself slowly. The story will not hurry. It will continue when leaves are dry enough to fall, when a rose is sun-warmed enough to open. For now, simply stay here with Catherine, with Henry, in the fine light of morning, where expectations rest like dew across the lawn, and each breath is a newly lit candle, flickering kindly before it vanishes into the mild air. Perhaps we begin with a very soft sigh, like a lake rippling because a single leaf has fallen. Summer arrives as thin sunlight on leaded panes, bees tracing slow circles, cicadas weaving a warm, pulsing carpet of sound. In a room facing a white pebble garden, beeswax candles run in gentle rivers, dripping to a metal tray with little fizzing whispers. Sandalwood and lilies blend into a murmur of a story that does not wish to speak too loudly. There sits Bessie Blount Elizabeth, but everyone says Bessie by the window. Her hair waves like a small stream, her eyes clear as dew held on a blade of grass. Henry stops by, and their story, like all ordinary stories, begins with a glance held a moment longer than necessary. Let the pace drift like cloud shadow, for even history deserves a nap. The cicadas soften, a paper fan opens, then closes, leaving a breeze as cool as a mother's palm. Bessie holds a roll of linen, perhaps against the sun. Henry notices a ribbon of light running along her wrist, like a quicksilver fish. Far off, the river is unrushed. Willows bow their heads. Footfalls in the corridor light as pouring sand dissolve away. In such a space, the largest decisions of an empire are written in the palest ink. A meeting, a smile, a breath. Official chronicles file Bessie as a mistress, a word drier than a rose stem in late summer. But if you lean close, you hear other things. A steady heartbeat. In. Out. The breathing of a girl of 17, 18, raised among town bells and the smell of fresh bread. They say that on silk-soft afternoons she read awkward lines of French, that she sometimes played with a small dog on the tiled step. These small things prove that history is not only acts and battles, but sunlight printed on the back of a hand. Then the child arrives, as fruit follows its season. Henry Fitzroy, meaning the king's son, cries his first cry among the scents of fresh candles and sandalwood, while a breeze taps the window gently. The christening, tradition has it, was simple. Little trumpet, much lily. We hear water touch the infant, cool as a blessing. Linen take the last drop. A long exhale from someone, perhaps Bessie, perhaps Henry, perhaps the castle itself, a great stone that sometimes remembers to breathe. There is a detail few linger on. Years later, Henry made Fitzroy Duke of Richmond and Somerset, gifting offices so grand the robes nearly outran the stride. As a teenager, he kept his own household, council, lessons in how to move like someone who might, only might, one day be considered. Under northern stars, they say he rode through barley fields, his cloak drawing a curve in the air like a bird's wing. But courtly joy was thin as morning mist. A Fitzroy prince is not a lawful prince that is the law, and the law rarely writes poetry. Henry could reward and dream, yet the throne is a heavy chair that admits only those whom ritual stamps approved. Here we set down a feather-light jest, like placing a leaf on water. If your office meetings drag on to end with per company policy, congratulations, you've tasted Fitzroy's mood before the law. And then we let it quiet again. Bedtime stories have no need to laugh aloud. Bessie stepped out of the court's bright circle by a few very slow steps. She carried a basket within it, flowers turning colour, a grey velvet wrap, and a folded letter scented with lavender. The door closed as softly as eyelids, leaving inside a child's crying to blend with wind. Some mornings she rose early, heard the tower's wind-borne hum, brewed a little tea, so slowly the hourglass wanted to sleep. In that hush, we hear hearth coals tick, birds shorten their songs to a few plain notes, and somewhere the heart of a mother folding her longing as neatly as a handkerchief. History keeps another hard-to-see scrap. Fitzroy left early, only 17. 70 moons or so, not enough to learn the feel of a hand on the throne's armrest. Historians infer illness. We, in a lullaby, need only know this. Some candles burn beautifully, but only for a windy evening. If you place your palm to your chest, you may notice your pulse slow a little, as though sensing that brevities often echo the longest. We return to the room where it began. Afternoon tilts honey through the window. On the metal tray, the beeswax has cooled into small roads. With imagination, you might follow them like a map of a quiet city, each corner a memory. Bessie may be writing a last few lines. Slanted hand, brown ink, white spaces generous as the rests in a song. Henry is elsewhere in the palace, among maps, petitions, red wax seals. He sets his pen down, then lifts it, then sets it down. Each pause is an audible exhale. If we draw a fine thread from this tale to now, we see people of any era try to name their hopes, Fitzroy, inventing titles as handsome as today's project codenames and office plaques. Yet outside the glass, clouds move at the speed of clouds, and waves keep the rhythm of waves. Life, in the end, is a lullaby, refrains repeating until all can hum, then fading. Let the breeze pass through your hair. Let Lily's scent linger on a sleeve. Listen to one more tolling of the tower, slow, even, full of empty space. In such stillness, Bessie Blount is no margin note. She is a figure by a summer window, watching a sleeping child, awaiting a tender brush of wind on the cheek. Henry Fitzroy is not only the illegitimate son, he is a lamp burning in a long corridor, then going out very softly, as if even the darkness wished to keep quiet. And as night sets a gentle hand on the sill, we close this part as we close a carved wooden box, unhurried, without a sound, so that lavender lingers a little while longer. You breathe. In, out, slowly, hearing your heart step in time with the hearth's small clicks. The story takes one step more, then rests, like a traveller laying a cloak beside a tent, sitting down and smiling at what has been. Perhaps we begin this part with a very soft breeze slipping through Hampton Court's rose trellis. The scent of rain-wet petals mixes with damp earth, and cicadas hum like a background symphony no one arranged. Wind brushes stone arches, making the candles in the banquet hall tremble, their light shimmering like stars caught indoors. In such a setting, the two Boleyn sisters step into history lightly, as if merely attending a summer ball, yet their footsteps carry Europe to the edge of a religious storm. Mary Boleyn came first, gentle and mild. People said she was like a window open to a garden, clear yet easily closed by the wind. Henry noticed her, granted her a few dances, a few outings like someone trying a new cafe on the corner. Pleasant, but not compelling enough to linger. History's records treat Mary with restraint, as if she were only a passing portrait in a long corridor. Then came Anne. Not loud, not stunning in the classic sense, but her wit and finesse captivated Henry. At a banquet under candlelight spilling from crystal chandeliers, Anne wore a blue silk gown, a pearl glistening at her neck like morning dew. When she laughed, the sound rang like tiny glass bells falling into water, and the hall listened. Henry, once a king with all things, now resembled a youth in love, writing letters so ardent the ink nearly flamed. Those letters survive today. Henry once wrote, "I long to hold you, no less than a thirsty man longs to drink." Reading it now, one might smile. A reminder that passionate words can turn into archival curiosities like office emails that, with time, feel far too dramatic. Yet in that era, each word was fire enough to test the patience of the Pope and all of Rome. Anne moved like a dancer, always stepping forward then back half a pace. In secret meetings beneath ancient oaks, where fountains murmured among insect songs, she made Henry taste waiting. Few realized that it was precisely her graceful refusals that deepened his desire. And desire, when paired with power, always swells into great tides. Within the palace, Catherine of Aragon walked carpeted halls, hearing whispers trailing behind her. Candlelight caught her proud features, yet her eyes bore sorrow. Doors closed softly at her back, but cold wind seemed to follow, slipping through cracks and straight into the listener's chest. A marriage once sacred had become a chessboard. Anne, with enough beauty and keener wit, made herself the crucial piece, pushing Henry toward his choice, to sever ties with Rome. Not an instant's decision, but days and nights, letters and glances, and then a church split in two, like a mirror breaking, because of a woman's luminous presence at a banquet. Listen to the room's heartbeat, slow, steady between whispers, sighs, and rain against the eaves. History may be written in ink and blood, but here it is traced by flickering candles, by silk brushing the floor, and by held breath. From today's lens, one might call it a game of power. But remember, this game unfolded slowly, like beeswax dripping into a tray. No explosion, only steady drops, until the tray filled and metal trembled. Henry and Anne, in this story, were those candles illuminating a hall, yet heating it beyond what anyone expected. And as you sit here breathing softly in the night, you might imagine yourself at such a banquet. Around you, candlelight shimmers, laughter ripples, scents of wine and roses drift. You hear your own heart. You hear the breeze outside the window. All is slow, all is calm. Yet somewhere beneath, a quiet tide begins to stir. Tonight, we step into another scene. A pale new moon hangs low in the sky, casting down faint silver light, like a veil spread across the land. In the distance, church bells toll softly, echoing over dew-soaked meadows, like the deep breathing of a world about to change. Amid this stillness, Henry VIII exhales slow, heavy, and declares that England is no longer bound to Rome. That night, the chains tying his kingdom to the papacy shattered like glass in the cold wind, swirling over Hampton Court's rooftops. The court resembled a feast just ended. Cheers rose from supporters, but sighs from cardinals mingled in between like the soundscape of a football match. Some clap, some bury their heads. And, as always, the one with the microphone has the last word. The Act of Supremacy was passed, naming Henry Supreme Head of the Church of England, just a line on paper, yet as heavy as a mountain range. In stone chambers, the fireplace crackled, flames snapping like a slow drum. Smoke and incense drifted from the altar, blending with the scent of charred ebony wood. Outside, monasteries once sacred havens were being dissolved. Oak doors closed for the last time, holy texts torn into fragments, scattering on the stone floor like autumn leaves. Monks, robes in hand, walked heavily through deserted cloisters. Their fingers trembled as they brushed cold walls, clinging to the last warmth of their old faith. For common folk, it felt like a strange dream. They heard the footsteps of monks leaving, doors shutting, and sighed quietly like us today, watching a familiar cafe suddenly close down. Not a catastrophe, but a rhythm of life interrupted. Meanwhile, Anne Boleyn became queen, ascending the throne with eyes alight. Yet joy proved brief, like a spring breeze fading before it warms the skin. Her first child, Elizabeth, was a girl. Henry, who longed for a male heir, sat in silence. On his table, a candle burned low, wax dripping into hardened pools, the only sound a faint crackle as it broke. The palace, once alive with banquets, was wrapped now in foggy quiet. If we listen carefully, we can hear the heartbeat of that space, slow, steady, between the patter of rain on glass. Joy and sorrow merged, forming an atmosphere like a song with no refrain. From today's view, it seems strange that one man's private love could spark a religious movement. It is a little like a personal text message accidentally screenshotted and shared across social media, private passion becoming public history. Thus, the Church of England was born not from long theological councils, but from love letters and the yearning for an heir. Beneath the starry sky of that night, with wind brushing the willows, a new era began. Yet within history's bright light, we can still hear the sighs of those who lost their spiritual homes. As in modern life, whenever something new rises, something old always falls away. You listening now can feel the warmth of the hearth, the flickering of a dying candle, and the soft rhythm of rain outside. This is not only the story of a king and a church, it is a turning point where love and power entwined, leaving echoes that still resonate today. Let us change the tempo, the way you flip an hourglass and watch the sand fall a shade slower. That morning entered the palace in a pale honey hue, as if poured through the curtains. In the rose garden, dew still clung to petals round glass beads that flashed and slipped onto the lawn with sounds so faint they were almost imagined. The air breathed in, out, evenly. And within that breath came Jane Seymour, without trumpets, only a small smile neat as a needle touching silk. Jane was not the blaze of a grand court portrait. She had the gentleness of polished oak, of well-measured herbal tea, of linen dried in the right Sunday, loose brown hair, eyes filled with a peace no textbook can teach. When she crossed a corridor, candle flames on silver sticks seemed to slow, less capricious, as if soothed. In the warm room, the hearth clicked softly. Musk, sweetgrass, and dried herbs lay together in the air, a scent that felt like a cradle for the mind. Her work was not decree or debate, but small, tidal things. Setting a warm cup of tea on a silver tray, smoothing a silk coverlet after fever, reminding Henry to rest his eyes between stacks of papers, touching the bell like a measured breath. Today we might call it micromanagement of kindness. In Tudor halls, it was a skiff keeping the lake of power from wrinkling too soon. Henry Long used to clatter and edict, noticed his pulses, like embers gathering into a poised red rose, balanced, warm, sufficient. Jane's chamber lived in a low light, yellow as the heart of a ripe pear. She liked the window cracked for river air to slip through the curtains, carrying damp earth, a far-off oar, the shy call of a water rail. Sometimes she set a vase of aster at the bedside, petals fine as whispers. "You are a father," she said softly enough for only breath to hear. "The realm must learn to breathe evenly." Henry nodded slowly, like a beginner practicing a nameless meditation. Summer passed by in cricket tones. Autumn arrived with baked apples and a prickle of cinnamon. Nights lengthened, the sky a navy sweater studded with stars. Candles burned another ring in the chapel, and Jane brought what the dynasty longed for, a prince. That night, an infant's cry tiny as a bird, splitting shell touched the vault and fell back in a bead string of sound. Ladies moved on quiet feet, white linen over forearms, bowls of warm water exhaling mist. At the window the moon hung still, concurrence without a word. They named the child Edward, a simple name, upright as a milestone. The christening was modest. Candlelight shivered on water like a dream. Resin on the cross, hilt, wine, new cut beeswax, all mingled with the murmured litany. Henry stood nearby, hand on a chair arm, shoulders lowered by a fraction small signs of a vast relief. If you place your palm upon your chest, you might feel your own heart fall in with the wax's drip. Tick, tick. A rare, steady chorus at a turning of history. The official line is spare. Jane bore Edward in October 1537. 12 days later she departed, likely of childbed fever, an illness medicine then could not yet name properly. History writes that in a strand of ink. We hear it as a long breath dissolving into a rug of herbs. In the chamber, the window drew in, curtains fell lower, voices gentled. On the bedside table, the aster changed quietly from white to ivory, then let the petals go. Jane lay on her side, hand unclenched, eyes closed as if only dozing through noon. Henry came, not as king but as a man. He sat for a long time, listening to the hearth gone small, to rain pecking the stone ledge. Perhaps he remembered the warm tea, the linen line dried, the midday naps she urged. It is often the tiny things, little pins holding the fabric of days that outlast ceremony. When Jane left, the emptiness was not a vacant throne, but a shallow on a pillow smoothed each morning, lacking its former weight. The court still had to move. Letters wanted seals, taxes signatures, statutes their readings. Yet some evenings, twilight purpled the vault. The chapel consort practiced a slow purveying, and the lampman made his round, trimming wicks so each flame grew coin-round and calm. A palace fond of noise seemed to learn a new word. Softly. Softly closing doors, softly walking, softly speaking, and softly breathing. If you want a small link to our century, Jane may have been Tudor's first anonymous mental wellness advisor, reminding the king to hydrate, to sleep, to sort urgent from important 3 lessons modern phone apps try to teach us by notification. And Edward, the child, was like a banner that reads, "Sent successfully." It flashes briefly, then fades, and the work goes on. Between the dates, a lesser-known thread remains. Henry mourned Jane longer than many suppose, and later asked to be buried beside her. That is the language of silence, writing a testament by choosing a distance a pair of stones close enough that whispers need travel no farther. For common folk, memory of Jane behaved like cinnamon after feast days. Open a cupboard and it lingers, long after the table is cleared. Night closes with a soft wind. Glass shades settle over candles. Flames contract to golden seeds. The river turns dark green, black. Late petals ride the current as if unhurried messengers. You listening may let your shoulders drop, and let your breath join the castle's long breath. In, out, slow, even. A brief dawn has passed, but it was enough to point the way like a swath of light on a night sea, not lasting but leading a boat ashore. Somewhere, in a quiet room, A cradle rocks. Wood touches wood, with a tiny hush, as if shushing the world. Edward sleeps, hand loosely closed, dreaming dreams without shape, and Jane, in everyone's recollection, still crosses a corridor with a silver tray, leaving behind a slender brightness like cooled beeswax's pale path. Many roads will fork from here, but the stretch that passes through Jane stays smooth as silk, cool as river stone, and warm as the day's first cup of tea. We open this chapter like a late afternoon window, slowly, letting the old rain breeze drift across our hands. On the river, a fine veil of mist lies still, and distant oars tap the surface, sending ripples that roll out and disappear very softly. Willow leaves brush one another in whispers. In a breathing rhythm, inhale, exhale. The court prepares to greet a guest. Anne of Cleves, a woman entering England through a portrait. That portrait, made by a master, carries subdued varnished tones, like the sheen of carved armrests. The brushwork is temperate, neither flattering nor unkind, a dialect of light. And like so many modern tales, a dazzling profile arrived before the person in flesh and breath. If you have ever met someone solely because of a perfect display picture, you'll understand the court's pulse now, hopeful, but hushed. The last sail is furled, the ship makes harbour, the wind brings salt and wet cloth, moving across the quay like an introduction. In the great hall, candles rise in rows, their gold doubled by dim mirrors. Polished dark panelling, a stone floor with the sheen of a small lake. Anne enters with kindly folds in her gown, her expression soft as pre-rain cloud. Her smile is not blazing but warm, the sort that serves a long conversation. Henry looks, and his gaze passes over her like wind across strings, making a very faint whoosh, and is gone. Nothing breaks, only a subtle drop in the room's temperature, like clouds slipping over the moon. The reception proceeds like a whispered concert. Silver spoons touch plates. Wine trembles in goblets. The hum of cicadas outside joins the lute within. Anne bows an action as gentle as a bird's wing. She speaks measured phrases, keeping the conversation as one guards a candle. But the king's heart, weathered by prior storms, seems to exhale more slowly, not in calm, but in distance. By night's end, Henry lets fall an ember-cool verdict. The marriage would be difficult to perform. The official story is known. An arranged union soon annulled for reasons both delicate and administrative, much like a modern project deemed not strategically aligned. Secretaries must rewrite the paper, replace ended with made null, so every party can keep its poise. Anne receives the style, the king's sister, with houses, income, and a courteous arm in place of a crown. The law speaks gently here, like a mist that wets the coat before one notices. On the first night after the seals had dried, the castle is as empty as a church without service. A tired crescent of moon lies along the red brick wall, drawing a silver smile. The wind stirs dry leaves into a rattle, like parchment turning. In a quiet chamber, a vacant chair leaves a human-shaped hollow in the cushion that slowly lifts, then smooths. Even the objects seem to learn to breathe, inhale, exhale, closing the chapter without creak or clang. Anne moves to a quieter residence, whose garden is sufficient rather than grand. White roses, hydrangeas, a faithful stand of asters. Morning pours through a small window, settling on the rim of porcelain. She writes to a confidante's slanted hand, brown ink about these new days. Here the wind speaks softly, and so do people. Few recall that she remained on cordial terms with the court, sometimes returning for ceremonies, sipping a pale wine like spring water, smiling with understanding eyes. And Anne, an unshowy sweetness lived on, calmly, outlasting the rough waves, long enough to watch history file down its sharper edges. As to the first meeting, the king's disappointment was likely more than looks. It was the gap between imagined and real, a gap we all have stepped into. A portrait is light already balanced. A person is the natural light of late afternoon, sometimes with a thin cloud sliding over. Henry, a believer in the brush, found himself a stranded traveller at a platform with an empty valise, an image faintly comic, if we temper our judgment of kings. At court, table linens are folded the way one folds a thought. Tudor diplomacy, no email, of course, had pigeons, envoys, red wax, and very long opening paragraphs. Forms of address must change. Seating plans must be redrawn. If you've ever renamed a shared folder and broken an entire link structure, you can sympathize with the clerks. Each stroke of the quill is followed by a sigh. The soundscape remains gentle. A bird pecking at the sill, chords of a blind rubbing the frame, a hearth, coal confessing in a tiny crack. Colours are mild, candle, gold, warm brown wood, the grey-green of a sky about to rain. Light walks the carpet like a cat, leaving no trail. And Anne, within it all, keeps her kindness, as if the world had quietly moved a stone from her path so she would not stumble. A lesser-mentioned detail. Among her grants was the freedom to move through certain royal houses, doors opening on sunlit days, reading hours, and unexamined walks. In those rooms, she learned to place flowers where light would greet them toward evening, to set a chair where the day's last beam would come to rest. The small curriculum of a life that can be lived. Henry, elsewhere, learned perhaps that beauty, titles, and exquisitely stitched portrait borders do not always equal the warmth of a handclasp. On deeper nights he sat before the fire, hearing wind play the flue like a long flute. The red wax seal shone under candlelight, but that shine did not warm his fingers. Sometimes he smiled, weary. A portrait is a portrait, as our age sighs. A photo is a photo. He pinched one candle out, leaving the room to the hearth's slow breath. As the tale settles, you may hear your own pulse more clearly, touching pauses like smooth pebbles under water. Anne did not seize history with thunder. She passed through it like rain on grass, soft, steady, enough to keep the earth green. The king's sister sounds like consolation, yet carries a lesson. Sometimes the half-step back is the only way forward and the quiet way to endure. Now we close the casement gently. Outside, evening dew gathers thinly on the steps. Inside, beeswax and clean linen linger in the air. You breathe. In, out, slowly. On the sill, an aster opens late, its fine petals trembling like a second hand, crossing a kind minute. The story moves a little farther in calm, leaving behind the papery rustle of leaves and a stripe of moon silver still resting on the wall. We draw this curtain as one might pull a gauzy drape, unhurried, so the afternoon light can spill onto the tiles in quiet diamonds. In the garden along the wall, the June wind goes softly, just enough to stir daisies and make the maids' hems murmur. The air is warm, fresh-cut grass lingering, and somewhere a skylark scatters fine notes into the sky. At the edge of this scene, Catherine Howard steps in like a young sunbeam, her hair the colour of early wheat, her smile thin as a butterfly resting on a crystal rim. In candle-lit rooms, flames dance on silver posts, dusting the panelled walls with diluted gold. Henry looks at Catherine, and the weathered heart that has known so many storms finds, oddly, a lighter beat. They say he called her a rose without a thorn, a tagline ripe for a summer brochure, sweet, enticing, the sort that makes you buy an extra bouquet. Catherine laughs often, speaks softly, and moves through corridors like a stream just out of forest, cool and innocent. Yet the palace is an instrument of exquisite sensitivity. A touch brings notes you cannot see. Whispers travel along red carpets the way ants move through seams, slow, steady. Somewhere a small wooden box opens. Old letters, ink-thinned by years, are turned like dry leaves. The men's names appear: the music tutor Manox, the steward Francis Derham, later Thomas Culpepper, names like small boats once moored in a girl's harbour before she knew how to label the seasons of her heart. Wind threads the arch into a flute-like tone. On the floor, candlelight shines, drawing narrow golden roads. In their midst, Catherine learns to tilt her head, to hold a handkerchief, to answer just politely enough while keeping the youth in her voice. She is June, thin, fragrant, easy to love. The court is November. Many coats, many drawers, many rules. Imagine a very thick HR manual. The section Relationships Prior to Employment is surely printed in the tiniest of fonts, Rumour slips into supper like a stray hair on linen, hard to notice, impossible to ignore once seen. Questions rise at the right volume, glances are measured, and then, like misting rain, accusations coat the corridors. Evidence is fetched, parchment unrolled, wax seals cracked, the private memory of a young person brought to the scales. Not unlike today, when an old photo resurfaces online, not loud, yet enough to jar a heartbeat. In the rooms of inquiry, voices are not raised, but words lie cool as the edge of a blade outside a window. Catherine sits straight, fingers interlaced, keeping her breath even. In, out, though the air thins. Men in dark gowns bow over bundles of paper, their quills scratching like rain on roof tiles. Through a small window, a slant of light isolates floating dust grains of time, unhurried, belonging to no one. A lesser-told detail. Before the collapse, Catherine asked to see the king in private, to find a little hush between them. The request moved through many hands like a paper boat in channels, and settled in the eddies of procedure. Personal feeling, once more, snagged on the grate of machinery. Night in the damp cell passes in the scent of cold stone and the drip of unseen water. The tower bell falls silent. The world seems to hold its breath for the next motion. Catherine sits by the narrow window, hears wind rasp the bars, imagines it the sound of silk on a corridor floor. She is very young, argued over in numbers, unmistakable in season. She remembers rose gardens, simple dance steps, that smile, a smile not built for tempests. At dawn, the sky opens a band of milky grey. Soldiers' boots set a steady meter on stone. A door swings. Morning air enters. The dews chill, taking her hands. Everything moves in slow mechanics. Steps, corners, stair. At a distance, the steel lies quiet as a thin horizon. It does not gleam. It only returns the colour of early day. Catherine closes her eyes briefly, as if she has just recalled a line of song. The heartbeat slows, then slows again. History will tell the rest in few words. Here, we only listen to wind travelling a narrow run in the wall. And so the June smile withers not with thunder, but with moonwash. The palace continues, the banquets continue, new music rises in the great hall, but in a very small place, a silence remains. Like the shallow in a silk pillow no one touches. Henry, for his part, may learn an old sentence anew. Beauty is easily mistaken for endurance. By day's end, candlelight is still lovely, but only sunlight warms a long corridor, threading one modern link. Catherine is a gentle reminder that the personal records of youth ink not yet cured should not be lifted with the gauntlet of power. Memory, like linen in sun, needs time to soften, to scent, to be folded neatly into a cupboard. When shaken between drafts, it tears at the tenderest seams. Evening drops slowly. On the sill, a late hydrangea keeps a pale green like milked water. The hearth grows sparse, leaving only ticks of sound, tick, tick, punctuation at a page's end. You who listen may place a hand on your chest and let your pulse settle with the footfall of wind. There is no need to retain the clauses, the ranks, the styles. Only remember that a June smile once passed here, and now rests like an old stripe of sunlight on cool stone. Let us begin this part as we would ease shut a window swaying in the breeze. The hinge hums almost silently, then rests. On the sill, an oil lamp burns with a small pear-shaped flame, brushing gold over leather spines. In a corner, the hourglass falls grain by grain, as softly as chalk dust on a psalm page. Within the palace's steady breath, in, out, Catherine Parr enters the tale like a gentle rest, letting every surrounding sound find its quieter setting. She does not arrive with festival blaze. She carries the calm of parchment pressed smooth, of a quill dipped just enough, of an herb tea neither hot nor cool. Her eyes are warm and clear, her voice rounded, without edges like a raindrop poised on a leaf. She sits at a book-laden desk, fingers grazing the margin, turning leaves as if they were little gates into a quiet garden. Henry, weathered by many storms, finds his shoulders lowering each time she speaks. Their study is lit by the kindness of lamplight. On the table, new printed scriptures, petitions, a few scrolls breathing beeswax and oak. Catherine and the king discuss adjustments of doctrine, tones moderate, words careful like gardeners, trimming dry tips from roses. Outside the casement, river air threads the chestnuts, bringing a periodic rustle that gives thought somewhere to settle. Sometimes Catherine reads a prayer in English novel in that age, and the lamp's flame seems to bow with the cadence. Chronicles name Catherine Parr as a rare learned woman of Tudor days, also as the wife who patiently retired Henry to his children. On dew-heavy mornings, she leads him among the roses, points out jasmine that opens without show, as if to say power is also a night scent arriving, departing. Sparrows touch along the hedge, sprinkling a tiny brightness into the air. Henry walks slower, hearing his step on gravel, his exhale lengthen and lengthen again. On winter mornings, when the sky lies like grey silk, Catherine asks the servants to part the curtains, to let the cool light breathe for the tired. She settles very small quarrels among the maids, whose turn with an even voice that neither scolds nor soothes, like a brook touching a bank. Today one might call it the management of calm. Never found in the clerk's manual, yet the thing that keeps a house from needless thunder. Few notice she is an author too. She composes and publishes prayers, becoming the first English queen to print under her own name. It sounds like a footnote, yet the lamps of that hour surely shone a hair brighter each time the ink dried. Many afternoons Henry asks her to read the plainer passages. Each word falls onto the coverlet like rain, chilling no one, only moistening old habits. In a dim corner, a quill lies beside a wedding ring. For an instant the flame catches the ring and releases a star onto the ceiling. Sometimes they rearrange the study. Catherine slides a chair toward the window. Henry lowers a shelf so Elizabeth or Mary can reach. Small motions draw long distances together. You can hear cloth on cloth, wood on wood, and between them an unnamed sound steadiness, moving. At noons of quiet, Catherine spreads a river map and invites Henry's finger to travel the quays. Southwark, Greenwich. She speaks of boats carrying books, wine, even gossip minor currents that make a history. They follow wind and water, she says, as we follow our breathing. Henry smiles briefly, freely. In our day, she would tame his inbox with excellent filters. Hush what is noisy, keep what is needful. Some afternoons the sun falls through glass into honey-coloured slants. Catherine dusts book spines, her breath so fine it looks like a thread of smoke. She writes to Mary, to Elizabeth, to Edward lines of silk, tying 3 hearts to the same window frame. They say the family table, thanks to her, learned to hold fewer gaps, chairs drew closer, spoons clicked less. As Henry's strength ebbs like embers sinking low, Catherine sits at his bedside. Her hand is warm over his broad one. Outside, small rain beads the tiles, tapping an unhurried time. The oil lamp lowers, the globe turning dim. Catherine reads the last prayers without tremor. Pauses between sentences become shared breathing, inhale, exhale, 2 threads twisted until they are a single quiet line. A tear of hers falls light as a drop of ink into white linen, leaving hardly a mark. History records little of such instants. Breathed his last, a date, a line, yet the room keeps what needs no script. Night jasmine left in the curtain, the mellow of wood, a late sparrow's wing against the sill. And Catherine, upright as a candle of sufficient height, carries the arrangements forward with the composure that is her nature. Some say that later she took her own short road, married Thomas Seymour, and died of childbed fever. But that belongs to a new season. For now we only watch her replace a book on its shelf, send the embers to sleep, draw the curtain so there is light enough for one person to nod tonight. If we must draw a thread to today, perhaps Catherine Parr is a gentle emblem of a skill every house needs. Slowing a room, by voice, by chair, by tea, by letter. She reminds us every kingdom, even the very small one called family, stands best when it breathes evenly. And at the moment Henry closed his eyes, the rest note she set down turned tempest into shoreline, letting waves come and go without eating the land. You who listen may let your shoulders lower, let your hands find each other, let your gaze soften like a lamp turned low. Outside, the wind moves at the speed of wind, no faster. Inside, your heart moves at the pace of your heart no quicker. The tale goes on, but here we allow it to sit for a long while in the chair by the window, watching life breathe out and breathe in, peacefully. The scene opens on a damp morning, mist draped across the tiled roofs of ancient monasteries. The final bell tolls deep, long like the breath of an elder who has lived long enough. Then silence, strange and thick, settles in. Only the soft patter of drizzle on leaves and the measured steps of monks departing remain. Their habits hang heavy with rain, hems dragging across stone floors, leaving dark streaks like memories that refuse to fade. In the courtyard, Henry is not present in body, yet his power hovers like a cold wind through the trees. The decree of dissolution is carried out as if it were a reversed ritual. Crosses lowered, incense replaced by the scent of fresh paint, prayers drowned beneath hammer blows. A statue of the Virgin shatters. Candle wax drips gold onto stone, mingling with raindrops. Villagers stand at a distance, voiceless. Their eyes are hollow, as though watching part of their own spirit stripped from the earth. Some whisper that the wealth will soon fund royal feasts, golden embroidery for a new queen's gown, or lavish hunting parties. Others try to comfort themselves. Perhaps this is necessary change, an escape from papal chains. But still, emptiness lingers, echoing like wind whistling through abandoned cloisters. In the countryside, fields once owned by monasteries are handed to nobles and merchants favoured by the crown. The scrape of ploughs on fresh earth cannot hide the absence. These furrows once fed the poor with bowls of porridge, with crusts of bread from monastic kitchens. Now fences rise, and passing villagers hear only the clang of iron where once there were prayers. Small schools, once run by monks beneath timber roofs, vanish too. No more voices of children learning hymns by heart. In the steady breath of history, this was a moment of crossing. The light of reform entwined with the shadow of loss. Henry succeeded in founding a new church, the Church of England, but the cost was memories wiped clean, like chalk brushed from a slate. Today, when we step into ruined monasteries, where only arches frame the open sky, the wind moans like an orphaned prayer. Grass covers the old floors, birds nest where altars once stood. Visitors often snap photos, post them online with simple captions, treating the place as a picturesque ruin. But if you pause, close your eyes, and breathe deeply, another sound arrives, the sound of 1,000 breaths once rising in the same hymn, now scattered to the wind. Perhaps Henry too, in some private moment, heard this emptiness. He had gold, titles, and his new supremacy, but hidden within his own sighs, he may have sensed what cannot be bought. Stillness of the soul. You sitting quietly in the night can feel this contrast. Hammer and prayer, candle and ash, incense and wet earth. In your slow breathing, you come to a simple truth. Reform does not always mean light. Sometimes it plants seeds of quiet sorrow, growing silently through centuries. We begin as one might ease a casement shut to soften the draught. The wood kisses the latch with a hush, then rests. In the dim council room, the hearth breathes with damp logs, painting the walls with water-like light. Outside, mist loops itself around old stone saints, a silver scarf on mossy shoulders. You sit close, hearing the fire's soft clicks, beeswax mingling with warm vellum, and the rain-scented breeze slipping through a seam to lay a cool film across the nape. Henry VIII enters without clamour, his heavy mantle brushing the carpet, his eyes keen as freshly ground steel glide over the stacked rolls of statute. He lifts a hand to summon his councillors. Quills touch ink, aged parchment rustles like dry leaves turning. In the room's moist hush, each stroke sounds like a far bell, reminding you that something old is quietly cracking. They begin with the act of succession. A small spring of the nib at the margin makes a sentence appear like a new-cut channel straight, still, deciding the water's way. From this night, a child may be pulled into or pushed out of the line by a single signature. A name conceived in secret hours, a bloodline beyond design, each can be reversed in ink, from red to black, from presence to absence. Somewhere beyond the casement, the rain taps the roof soft knocks, as though asking whether there remains a border between human feeling and decree. When the act of treasons comes to hand, the hearth pops, shedding a spark. The draught broadens the edge of silence. One unardent phrase about a former queen may become a slippery step. In Tudor halls, praise and blame weigh like metal. Henceforth, the wind passing anyone's lips must go lighter. Each breath must be measured like grain. You can hear a quill pause so brief a rest that the lamp's flame seems to bow. More measures follow, each arriving with the thud of boards nailed to stone, firm, low, even. On carved plaques, the court's letters dry like fresh varnish, leaving a sting in the air. They stand as a row of lockers, neatly swallowing the private. A lady's silk chosen in the wrong colour, a confessor's hesitant doubt about a question not yet answered, a cradle song carried too loudly from the kitchen. The law can name them all. By the candle's tremor, Henry leans his spirit upon the style, supreme head, as on a sceptre. He taps the tabletop gently once, then once again, then once more not counting, only setting the room's breathing. From Parliament to court, from court to church and back, the command travels like a chain of oil lamps lit in darkness. Each flame advances the light, while trimming a little air from freedom's lungs. Beyond the window, the ramparts exhale sheets of fog. A guardsman straightens his cloak. His boots whisper against stone like salt spilled from a pouch. Far off, a mother hums a lullaby, and the tune meets the crown's new lintel. If her words stray into the wrong figure, will her casement forget how to open? History is often this, a hand placed lightly over another's mouth, gentle enough to leave no bruise, firm enough to still a verse. There are muted smiles beneath ceremonial beards. A few councillors murmur that drafting law now resembles arranging an electronic cabinet in some future office, give folders impressive names, lock permissions, then smile, because all is stabilised. But in the corridor the draft keeps hissing, carrying the sighs of those once called free citizens. They cross the flagged court, lift their caps, bow, and go silent like living statues. Succession grows bolder with examples. A king's bastard from a former season may, if desired, be raised, given estates, a council seat. Yet the steps upward are rigged with letters, a single reversal, and the stair dissolves as if it had never stood. Place, style, blood things once thought born solid reveal themselves as vellum folds, opened and shut by the hand that holds the pen. Treason, meanwhile, drops a net of fine mesh over the square, a glance thrown wrong at a shield bearing the royal arms, a missed cry at a procession, a verse whose cadence pinches a censor's pride any might become a story for the jail. Clerks pace methodically. Their drying mud marks the floor with fish. Bone tracks a map of thoughts newly zoned. In a corner, a candle shortens by one small notch. Shadows of lords stretch until they touch on the wall like slackened strings. Henry lays his palm on the fresh statute, pressing the vellum's edge, as if finding a pulse. He knows these lines will pass through many mouths and many years. Knowing, he breathes in deeply and lets it go slowly like a sailor trimming canvas before a discreet gust. We can draw a fine thread from that room to our own day. We live under terms and conditions as long as a riverside road, with tick boxes everyone agrees to so the gate will open. In Tudor darkness, statutes are those boxes, small, clear, unavoidable. You may not notice them while your tea is warm, but someday, when you sing the wrong refrain, you will meet them all at once. Night steps down one more stair. Outside, the rain has thinned to a sift over the lead. Inside, the last roll is tied. The red wax is pressed. The seal's eye shines like a fish watching fire. The keeper of time taps a small mallet on the table's edge, not to threaten, only to close the score. Robes rise, cloth brushes, cloth with a surf. Soft sound. Henry says nothing more, only touches the chair back, and in that touch lies the Empire's urging, proceed. You, who listen quietly, may try a deeper breath. Hearth warmth strokes your face. Candlelight quivers at the well of your eyes. If you attend closely, you can hear the law itself, moving not footfall, but paper taking a crease, one fold, then another packing the world into a box called order. Somewhere, a cradle song persists, growing small, then smaller. The statutes, written in this wet night, will remain at dawn standing like columns sheltering from rain and sun, and shading, too, a portion of the sky. And as you exhale, feel both the tightness and the odd symmetry of that age, where absolute power swept through like a storm, and the law meant to be a porch for the frail, at times became a bright shield for a bottomless desire. The hearth closes with a single faint click. The room darkens gently. Mist still braids the stone saints. Night draws a deep blue silk shawl over the roofs. A crescent moon hangs low, a pale fingernail softly scratching the lake of sky. Within the walls, torches are capped, candles turn down, and the palace settles into its long breath. In, out, steady. You follow the guards on their rounds. Boots tap marble into a hollow drumbeat, never loud, only enough to remind that here every whisper finds an ear. At the corners, wind threads arrow slits, carrying damp moss and a trace of resin from newly polished shafts. Above, narrow windows blink like half-lidded eyes. Behind heavy curtains, the ears of the secret web open like tumblers pressed to stone. By day they are servants, clerks, musicians, ladies in waiting. By night, titles fall away, leaving soft steps and dark notebooks. Henry VIII sits in a shadowed operations room where an oil lamp lays a gold streak across the map. He need not speak. The eyes know where to turn. From a nurse's cradle song to a small joke on a threshold, from a laugh that cracks in the hall to a slipped note on a lute string, each may become a shard for a file. You hear paper skim like a small fish. Events, persons, breaths are punctuated by brush and ink. Who mourns Jane Seymour a shade too long? Who sighs over that third marriage faded now like morning mist? Who, over a kitchen ale, says the wind tonight is as cold as the human heart? No answers are needed aloud. Questions find their way to the hand with the neatest script. At the corridor's end a candle shivers. A bead of wax falls to the tray like a knock from worry's knuckle. In a small chamber where brick walls keep the day's warmth, a maid cradles a silk-stuffed pillow, her breath counting distant footfalls. She knows. Laughter too crisp can read as mockery, silence too long as defiance, a reply too quick as premeditation, too slow as doubt. Between those hair-thin borders, people learn to speak with breath shorter, slower, softer. Beyond the walls, where fields have no battlements, news travels by millstones and pouring hands. A thatched inn sits beside the rutted road, its window breathing a clouded yellow. The innkeeper wipes a rim, eyes flicking like a bird's wing, and warns, solemn, "Hold your tongue, lest trouble borrow your name." The counsel lands on the table like a pebble, ripples once, then sinks. In the corner, the mill turns slowly. Its wooden clicks blend with murmurs into a standing caution that needs no conductor. Mothers sing their children to sleep, their lullabies circling around names they will never touch. The kings, the queens, the statutes. Songs make safe paths, skirting the bog of questions. On the sill, mist floats like chalk dust, clinging to the child's hair and cooling the brow. A father by the hearth thinks of a letter with a red wax seal that could arrive any dawn, calling him to London like a fish drawn by current. He is not sure he can swim home by harvest. In the market town, the church bell keeps its hour, yet a second tone shadows it in listeners' chests, the tread of a royal messenger. At evensong, someone whispers, "Did you see a stranger in the alehouse?" No one answers directly. They speak of weather, of barley, of wool, then tug their cloaks tighter, as though words, too, require a coat. On the roof, a sparrow beats its wings twice, then once more, then stillness, leaving room to hear a heart tap against the ribs. At court, reports are bundled like dry sheaves, aligned and bound. A clerk dots a seal. Beeswax lifts a ripe sweetness. He glances at Henry, still leaning back, eyes half closed, listening to the room breathe. In a corner, the kingdom's map lies open, dark pins scattered like stars from which some have been rubbed away. The net has reached every hamlet, every bridge, every tavern. No swords required, only ears, and notebooks that walk. A lesser-told thing, sometimes the hired listeners know how to spare. They let a sigh pass when it sounds more wind than grievance. They forget a private smile when it looks more like memory than blade. In the dark, Kindness sometimes lifts like banked embers under ash. Chronicles seldom write such small beats, but night remembers. Now stretch a thread to our present. We carry small black mirrors that watch day and night. Every touch, line, and picture leaves a shadow on some quiet server. What has changed? Perhaps only that light no longer trembles like candle flame, but cools like a screen. The anxious thump after a careless word remains the same. In any century, people learn to lower the voice, shut one door, and reread a sentence living as if cups are always pressed to the wall. Night lengthens by one breath. In the court, a maple leaf falls and clicks on stone like a small lament. A cat passes, its eyes two glass drops that see through. On the wall, a sentry's shadow glides away, leaving leather and rain in the air. You stand on the step, palm on a chilled stone, and feel it storing footfalls and words already gone. Somewhere a lamp is turned down. Somewhere a letter is folded and left unsent. Henry sleeps deep on silk and feather, his breathing the canal of a tamed river. His empire works like a machine of shadow, gears of fear, of quiet habits, of scribbling nibs. Yet night, curiously fair, keeps a portion for the people. Dawn. Before sunrise, the cockerel calls, dew grows heavy, and yesterday's unsaid words are lifted from the back and spread along the fence like linens. Hoping for Sunday, you hear your own heart restless, then easing as the horizon changes colour, from deep blue to ash to pale honey. Where the web reaches, people practice a new skill, loving by silence. They set a loaf on a neighbour's sill. They leave a bundle of wood beneath a roof. They nod in place of a perilous question. Thus, inside a mesh thick with eyes, a few spaces remain wide enough for a breath to pass untroubled. As the moon slips from the wall and the mist thins like tea steam, the first bell grows warmer. Someone at the alehouse taps the tabletop, a sound like a promise. Today we shall speak a little less, but look a little longer. And if you stand still for a few more beats, you will notice. Within a realm that rules by watching, common eyes still know how to close at the right hour. To dream, a small dream no ledger will ever hold. Crystal shades shaped like droplets soften the banquet light, scattering Hampton Court's great hall with silver glints. On the balcony, the moon slides behind a thin cloud and leaves a milky streak on the stone. In that hush, foreign envoys tread so gently that their shoes mark only a courteous tempo on the wooden floor, polite reminders that this evening belongs to ceremony and appraisal. Their smiles lie smooth as windless water, yet their eyes keep returning to the host, Henry VIII, who can send or stay any alliance with a single inclination of the head. Candle smoke curls slowly, mixing with warm wine and the resin of evergreen sprays. A lord bearing a silver tray passes like a comma between clauses. At the honour table, the greetings stitch together like gold thread. England, France, the Habsburg Empire, the Italian states, all listen to a music without notes, the breath of politics woven into silk rustle, the clink of glass, the steady heart of a keeper of secrets. When Henry severed from Rome, the old cord binding England to the papacy was tuned again, and the tone changed. Across the sea, the Habsburg realm of Charles V rose in anger. Courier letters flew like feathered arrows, bearing news of new embargoes. On the wharves, the tide leaned into London's stone and side. Warehouse masters swayed like poplars, counting bales of wool, bolts of cloth, chests of spice that suddenly knew no clear passage. In Paris, Francis I stood beneath the green damp vaults of Sainte-Chapelle, eyes lifted to story windows of saints, while ears kept to his counsellor's tread. "This Tudor fellow changeable as an April cloud," he murmured, half prayer and half arithmetic. Church bells rolled outward like salutes from an imagined fleet on the Seine, each peal a diplomatic drumbeat reminding all that step too soon, and the measure is lost. Southward, Catherine de' Medici, the rose with mindful thorns, read London's letters with guarded light. Once, Henry sketched the graceful curves of a marriage alliance. Since the purging of Catherine Howard, every floral dream arrived with a rider. The phrase, subject to approval by the Parliament of England, became a talismanic chime hanging over each vow, a glass wind bell lovely and easily shattered. Across the continent, trust loosened like mossed mortar in wet weather. Envoys spoke lower when they named Tudor romances. Clerks slanted their quills, wary of writing any queen's name too darkly, lest the ink be crossed out before it dries. In Antwerp counting rooms a sea map hung still, red threads between ports pausing like a heartbeat. Insurers recalculated in hush, as though the sea itself had ears. At Marseille, the harbour drums beat a soaked, low measure, signalling that commercial confidence had lost a little spring. In Venice, the gondoliers still sang, but with shorter phrases. The register of the age drifted downward, once doctrine and customs dues learned to share a voice. On the table, silver coins slid like fish, beautiful, cool, and scentless, while pledges rose warm and evaporative. An old envoy sighed that diplomacy is the art of pouring wine beside a candle, deft enough that the wine does not drown the flame, nor the flame drive the wine away. Henry VIII crossed his halls like a master shipwright walking a yard, each look a measurement, each nod a rivet, each smile a weld. He knew new spiritual sovereignty needed friendly moorings, yet he also wished the lines to wrap his own helm. So, between lute and whisper, he spoke in short segments, leaving listeners to complete the sentences in the white spaces. Those spaces, wide or narrow, often decided whether a mission sailed with a fair wind or none at all. There are lesser-told eddies, English clerics who fled to Flanders bearing books, the habit of script, and recipes for old brown ales. They became soft bridges between harbours that wanted trade, though the face of history wrinkled. Some French nobles trained their hawks to favour fish over hare, a private signal that the banquet should be simpler. Italian weavers turned to ash-grey cloth, the safe shade for seasons heavy with negotiation. From the edge of Hampton Court's hall you could hear layered sounds, the even breath of candles, the envoy's heels counting clauses, vellum whispering as a codicil slid into place. The royal kitchens played their quiet orchestra, mint, orange peel, goose fat, an invisible score that softened tempers just enough for an extra ascent. Out where the stone corridor loops the night air, dry leaves read like minutes no one signs. Empires, however great, must learn to whisper. In our era we have email, agendas, standardized minutes, yet the banquet remains a banquet. The lights must be tender, glass thin, and the main story flows like a hidden river beneath the carpet. Only the chime has changed phones instead of church bells, and hesitation is measured by a pulse on the wrist. Trust, in every century, still walks a bamboo bridge. Tread too hard, and the slats tremble. Midnight passes on a single thread of mist. The envoys bow in turn, their shadows on the boards like sails furling. Outside, the rose garden drinks dew, the earth cool as linen set to dry. Carriages roll and arc toward the gate, carrying the future's dispatches written in soft ink with firm intent. Behind them, the palace breathes evenly. Ahead, Europe breathes short, and you lingering beneath the balcony can hear diplomacy's bridge beat against the river's heart. Slow, careful, unbroken, as though the whole continent crosses a slick log, hands on ropes braided of creed, of commerce, and of romances grown old. Within that meter, Henry VIII remains the silent conductor. He needs no baton, only a gaze held one beat longer, a breath kept one beat more. His pauses make the whole hall hold its lungs. Then candle flames pulse again, glasses touch lightly, and the night closes like a letter without a sender's name, its meaning understood, its words left wisely unspoken. Lift your gaze to the stone where Tudor frescoes once blazed like a windless summer day. Now the paint is pale. Plaster has fallen to show the rough underskin. Gilt lines have thinned like memories rinsed by a spring tide. Under a turned-down oil lamp, the Queen's faces hover faintly, lace collars not yet dry of tears, and a stitched rose tilting as if a sentence had been swallowed. As you drift along the corridor, a dust of colour settles like a soft sigh, and candles wobble, laying a tremor across the stone eyelids of the knight's statues. Music has shifted its key. The old love songs of hair and hands step back. The lute draws a lower river, strings shivering like rainlit water, tugging sorrow to the room's far edge. In the consort chamber, the small drum is shy of striking. The knight's meter is a heart once broken, mended with a thread of incense smoke. A flautist turns aside so the last note can vanish into stone, while a copyist retitles the pieces from Song of Love to Song of Crown with a few strokes. As we rename a folder we hope no one will need again, English poets turn from the paired vows. They learn to paint halos round a crown, to call power a golden harvest, and to leave birdsong out where birds should be. In roadside inns a ballad travels from postman to pilgrim, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. A cricket under the bench warning a palm from the candle flame of majesty. Children memorize. Adults pretend to forget. Yet at the refrain the room still answers, as if fate itself could be counted by rhyme. In the galleries, darkness learns to stand upright. Pointed arches rise like praying fingers. Panes of colour catch the slant and pour it in strips of blue, deep red, and jade the palette of a world both splendid and bereaved. They call it the Gothic revival, but it is also a revival of memory. Each pane a cut in the day, scattering bright shards of the former tale upon the floor. Walk through those bands and you feel time has edges, and culture knows how to cast a shadow to hide its bruises. The English court becomes a living museum of interrupted stories. In the Hampton Court gardens, a fountain speaks in undertone, water touching stone like the pleads Catherine Howard never had time to voice. Along the paved walk, gardeners say the morning's dew beads in a line exactly where Anne Boleyn once passed, as if the trees remember a small step and a tilted profile. On the balustrade, the moss writes a blurred sentence, and you imagine a folded letter, unsent. Culture here is both veil and mirror. It hides to preserve. It reveals so we will not forget. Historians hang labels beside objects, dates, names, regnal styles aligned like pews in a chapel. Yet between the letters you hear the breathing of the white space. No plaque records how silk brushed a wet threshold on a night of rain. No catalogue sets down the way a smile went out when a door swung wide. Those unwritten things are heavy as dawn mist, settling on the reader's shoulders and making them shiver though the kind lamp burns on. In the instrument, maker's room, a luthier rubs oil into wood, his hand pausing over a scratch whose owner no one knows. Far off, a hymn in the new tongue sounds simpler words, less ceremonial tone, and even the sanctuary has learned a different voice. Still, when night falls, the strings wander back into sorrow's scale, like a buried stream finding its seam through rock. No one instructs, no one forbids. It simply moves. Folk culture retreats to the hearth. There, pies brown beside whispers. A wooden spoon turns a pot with the sound of an oar on a lake of memory. The teller avoids the king's name, but uses moonlight, wind, and cloak colour, so all will understand. Pastry faces are drawn with smiles. Someone bites a corner, and that small act is enough for the table to know. It is the art of roof walking. One false weight and the tiles will speak, but steady breath will carry you across. A fine thread touches now. We hang pictures on digital walls and fit filters to smooth the cracks. We play focus lists to blur the wish to weep. We call keeping save, forgetting delete, and rest on the promise of restore. Yet as always, there are scuffs that live only in the wood. They do not show in the image. They do not obey a command. They soften when a hand works oil in slowly, faithfully. Night deepens by a step. Wind strokes the arches with a cool palm. The moon cuts itself thin and lays slices on the floor. From far away, a church bell takes its time, each peal like a pebble dropped into the well of remembrance. You stand by a peeling wall, touch an old crack with a finger, and hear a fine string in your chest, not belonging to any one soul, but to an age that learned to love, to fear, and then to be quiet. Culture under the Tudors throws a long shade, not to hide the sun, but to point the path. Under that coolness, the shape of light is seen more truly. When you leave the hall, candles still burn low, and smoke lingers on the ceiling like regret. In the garden, water beads the leaf's edge, curving to a drop like the heart of a line about to fall. If you tilt an ear, you will hear wavering figures walking together, not jostling, not interrupting. They belong to a choir without a conductor, keeping time by breath alone, and you understand culture does not die. It changes garments, shifts its key, then stands a very long while beneath the moon to listen for its own return. As you walk slowly through the jewel chambers of the Tower of London, The soft glow of lamps rests upon glass cases where old robes and jewels lie. The 6 queens seem still to hover there, their presence woven into the hush. If you close your eyes, you may still hear the echoes, the laughter of banquets, the brass of processions, and the overlapping whispers of politics that once determined so many fates. Now all has settled into mist, lying quietly on cold stone, remembered only in the memory of the wind. In the age after the Tudors, lessons were drawn and shaped into principles. Parliament gained its voice in every royal marriage, the Church of England found its own footing, and the law was reshaped to keep shadows from stretching too long across the palace halls. The name Henry VIII remains heavy in memory, but it is also a landmark, reminding that power, left unchecked, becomes a chain. You leave the tower and find Hampton Court's gardens at dusk. The sunset stains the roses red, while jasmine scents drift in threads of smoke, winding around each step. Cicadas sing on in the leaves, as if nature writes its music regardless of human change. A light breeze passes, and the palace itself seems to breathe more slowly, allowing the past to rest beneath the soil. In this hush, a message comes woven with the wind. Power cannot stand upon the foundation of love misused, nor can love endure when forced beneath power. Henry VIII left a deep fracture, but from that very crack, seeds of freedom and responsibility took root and grew into history's long debates. Night settles gently. The crescent moon leans across the sky, pouring silver over the river. The water murmurs like a lullaby, joined by the rustling leaves, a soft music of rest. You breathe deeply, let your shoulders loosen, and allow your breath to move slowly with the breeze. The story of the king who once turned a royal bed into a court now closes, gently as a candle burning low, leaving only a wisp of smoke drifting upward. Carry this reminder into your sleep. Love and power, without balance, may become sentences upon those who trust them. But with clear eyes, you may learn to honor the freedom of your own heart. Now, as your eyelids close, let the wind cradle you with nature's eternal song. Sleep well safe, serene, and as light as moonlight scattering over the lake, so that in the morning you may wake to a new dawn, bright and tender.